Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this, our second last official council meeting of this term of council. I'd like to officially call this meeting to order at 1:02 p.m. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I believe we are still going to be missing Councillor Hayes, and Councillor Nishikawa is got her camera off, but I know she is with us. I do today want to acknowledge that we're on lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples, and it's Indigenous peoples that have cared for this territory for the benefit of future generations. Their stewardship throughout the ages is certainly recognized. I also want to say, for those people who are tuning in, I encourage you to go back and pull up our General and Finance Committee meeting from this morning. We had a wonderful presentation regarding the history of the Wata here in Muskoka. And truly help to understand what's gone on with Indigenous peoples and how they came to be here and how they've ended up in various different places across the country. But with that, we did receive a number of public comments regarding our official plan. And I know that council has received several individual letters from people regarding the official plan. We also know specifically our Muskoka sent in one according to my notes here. We do have a supplementary agenda today, and we have some additional public comments coming in from Ali Brown, Sean Donaldson, and Ken Pierce. We'll be producing some public comments. Do I have any disclosures of pecuniary interest this afternoon? Councillor Jaglowitz.
Chair, I'm uncertain that 11A, the closed session, I may have a conflict there. Do I declare it now or when we get there?
Madam Clerk, I'm going to suggest when we get to closed session, we can declare it at that particular point. So I appreciate that, Councillor Jaglowitz. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, and we do actually are going to have an amendment to our closed session items. And I'm going to suggest we go right ahead and do that. If I can do that at this particular point, we'll move that first resolution off the table. But to put this, basically, we need to consider some additional stuff in closed session. So I'm going to need just a show of hands to be able to put this resolution on the table. Council in favor of putting this in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have unanimous. Thank you very much. And that resolution is moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that council meeting agenda dated October 12th, 2022 be amended to add an item 11A, and that is 3 additional matters that are subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Council, all those in favor? That one is carried. Thank you. Appreciated. Right through here. Lots of stuff today. We've got some invited delegations, but I think we can move over through a couple of agenda items. And I can move that special planning committee minutes. Yep. So I do have a resolution moved by Councillor Bridgman, seconded by Councillor Jaglowitz. Be it resolved that the mayor and council adopt and enact the following minutes and recommendations contained in the October 12th, 2022 consent agenda and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. Firstly, the September 14th General Finance Committee meeting minutes, action items 1 to 3. September 14th council minutes. September 15th Planning Committee meeting minutes, action items 1 through 4. October 3rd Special Planning Committee meeting minutes, action items 1 to 2. And October 6th Special Council minutes. Council, any questions on those? Director Pink has his hand up, and I'm wondering if that's regarding our official plan. Mr. Pink?
No, it's not, but thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, Council. I just wanted to point out that on your action items, you may recall the discretionary sewage inspection policy was recommended for approval at Planning Committee in September. However, inadvertently, the wrong policy was attached to the agenda. You may recall a typo in some of the dates, and you'll just notice in your agenda packages you do see the final correct version. We wanted to make that clear that it was attached to this agenda, so that is the policy that's being approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Pink. Any other questions or comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay. Meeting minutes, all those. Surplus land. I think we've got a second till we get some delegations on here. Our first one is at 1:15, I believe, regarding the official plans. So we're going to hold on that. And we do have 8A, report from land agreements coordinator. That's a referring bylaw to that as well, I'm assuming, correct? We can probably deal with it at the bylaw. Does anybody have any questions on that report? Or we'll just go straight to the bylaw when we get there on bylaws. I think we're okay. Short road allowance. Official plan review adoption. We're going to hold on 8B for just a moment because I think we talked about 1:15 being the first delegation. And I believe there might be some people waiting in the waiting room to get in. I just got a quick message. Short road allowance bylaw. I'm going to jump ahead and go through some of these bylaws, if I may. Maybe someone can help me here. Where are we going to go to? Official plan 9A1. Okay, this is first short road allowance. Thank you for that. Moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor. Oh, we're going to have to change that. Thank you. Let's change that to Councillor Edwards. Seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that the original shore road allowance on 3 Mile Lake laying in front of concession 7, part of lot 14 want designated as part 1 on plan 35R 26824. Langos and Bloomer, roll 21650 be declared as surplus land, and that the clerk is hereby instructed to dispose of said property pursuant to sections 8, 9, 11 of Municipal Act 2001, and further that bylaw 2022-163 to stop, up, close, and convey the portion of original shore road allowance designated as part 1 on 35R 26824 be given 3 readings and finally passed. Shore road allowance on 3 Mile. Any questions from council? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We haven't got to the Windermere. Do we not have another? No, I can't move ahead on that one. I thought there was one more. Okay. Oh, that license agreement. Right. Maybe we should introduce that one. That is item number 2, 9A2. And who wants to handle that? Michelle, you? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Bylaw 2022-164 is to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign a license agreement between the township and the Windermere Golf and Country Club. This application was previously brought forward and approved by General Finance Committee in May 2021. Thank you.
Okay, let me unmute. Any questions on this particular one? Okay, I'm going to go. Councillor Jaglowitz.
Yeah, just an obvious question through your chair. It's recommended by General Finance of May of 2021. Why did it take so long to get to us?
Michelle.
Through you, Your Worship. It took quite a while for the golf club to obtain a registered plan of survey in order to proceed with drafting the license agreement. So that's part of the reason it took so long to come back to council. Thank you.
Councillor Jaglowitz, you okay with that?
Just one further. So is the agreement still appropriate then, as recommended, or has anything changed? Or
I don't believe anything has changed, and we were literally just waiting for the survey from Windermere Golf Club to be able to finalize this.
Thank you.
Okay. So, resolution moved by Councillor Jaglowitz, seconded by Councillor Mazan, be resolved that bylaw 2022-164 being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the corporate seal to a license agreement between the corporation of the township of Muskoka Lakes and Windermere Golf and Country Club be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Any further comments? All those in favor? That one too is carried. Thank you. I have a bylaw for the municipal 911 civic addressing system. Any comments from staff on that, or can I just go ahead? Any questions of council? I'm going to read the resolution moved by Councillor Kelly, second by Councillor Jaglowitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-140, being a bylaw to provide for the municipal 911 civic addressing system in the Township of Muskoka Lakes, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Any other comments? All those in favor? It is carried. Thank you. We have some parking bylaw updates to be done. Dr. Becky, did you want to comment on this in particular, or are you okay? We can just go right ahead with the update to the bylaw.
Nothing has been altered since the matter was considered by General and Finance, Your Worship. I would just proceed with the 3 readings and the vote.
Okay, thank you. And I think the same would probably apply to regulate traffic on township roads, which would be the next particular bylaw. But Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I'm assuming that you're talking about, item 4.
This is item 9A4, correct?
I just had a couple of questions on that. I mean, I can read what's there, but I am a little more concerned about not knowing. So for instance, the Whiting Beach parking lot that we historically had allowed people to leave their vehicles overnight and encourage that sort of thing. I'm wondering, involved in all of this, did we make any changes there? Because I really couldn't quite follow. I've heard discussion, but I don't know if we made any changes in that way.
Director Beckman.
Thank you, Your Worship. The answer to the question is no. The bylaw has been amended only to address the issue of abandoned vehicles and other items of personal property. Such items are identified by the absence of any formal license plate or identifying features. So to the councillor's question, if a trailer or what have you has been properly licensed and can be identified, then it won't be subject to this bylaw change.
Okay, there we go. So I have a resolution moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-146, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 2022-43, being a bylaw to regulate and control parking in the corporation of the Township of Muskoka Lakes, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Comments? All those in favor? And that too is carried. Thank you. One more Township Roads speed bylaw, and if I'm not mistaken, this is to regulate Ashforth Drive from East Bay Road to the end, and that's to regulate speed to 40 kilometers an hour. Council, any questions on this? Moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-150, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 2021-87, being a bylaw to regulate traffic on township roads in the Township of Muskoka Lakes, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Any further comments? All those in favor? That was carried. We're going to 115, and then we're going to get into some I guess I could designate site plan control. Let me go through a couple of these. First of all, moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that bylaws 2022-161, Borough Hamilton, Roll 1-2-19, and 2022-162, Bornstein, Roll 4-9-57 and 4-9-57-2 to designate site plan control, be ready first, second, and third time and finally passed. Any comments on site plan? All those in favor? Those are carried. I know there was a question. Hang on a second here. Site plan control. Designate our parking routes. This is out of our fire master plan. Moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Jaglowitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-129, being a bylaw to designate roads and private roadways as fire routes on which no parking of motor vehicles shall be permitted, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Any questions? All those in favor? That one is passed. Carried. Thank you. A8, deeming bylaw. Moved by Councillor Zabit, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-166 being a bylaw to deem lot 71 on Plan 7 Wood being a lot, a plan of subdivision is hereby deemed not to be a lot on a plan of subdivision for the purpose of section 50-3 of the Planning Act 1990 as amended. Lapsker Rule 9 or 6-942 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Any questions? All those in favor? That one is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we're at the Hunter Major. I know we're going to have some delegates on that, so I'm going to pause those at this time. And I think we're back to our 115 delegation. And I believe Mr. Spence might be the first to delegate, but I'm wondering if Mr. Pink, as we're going to move back to the official plan, if you want to do a quick introduction as to where we're at and how we're here and some of the comments we've received. Mr. Pink.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, the Council will recall that on Monday, October 3rd, there was a special planning committee meeting where the comments from the public meeting were discussed on the new draft official plan. Direction was given to staff and the consulting team to make further revisions. Attached to your agenda packages are both a red line version showing those changes made from the Monday, October 3rd version to present day, as well as a clean version of the latest draft of the new official plan. Together with that is a brief accompanying report outlining that process to date and recommending adoption. Later on your agenda is an adopting bylaw for your consideration, as was directed on Monday, October 3rd, to bring that adopting bylaw to the current council meeting. But I do understand we have a number of delegates to hear from today, and staff and the consulting team are here. We're available to answer any further questions that council may have on this project and draft. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pink. Our first delegate is Mr. Spence regarding 8B and also 9A9. He's in the meeting. Rick, we'll get you there. You go. Lovely day on the lake, we can see. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. My name is Rick Spence. I live at 1007 Omaneka Road, number 3 in Port Carling. I was a founder of Friends of Port Carling, which was formed in 2008 to oppose a subdivision known as Hannah's Landing, and I'm here today on some unfinished business. First, with an election coming up, I just want to thank this group. For years, we've longed for a council that would strike a strong balance on Muskoka development, and I think your new official plan does just that. So thank you very much to council and staff. I'm here today to request a tiny tweak. We just spotted a flaw in the OP's treatment of the Knoll, which is a prominent peak that overlooks Mirror Lake in the expansion lands east of Port Carling. The Knoll forms the dramatic backdrop to Mirror Lake for more than 65 homes and thousands of boaters a year. And in our long fight over Hannah's Landing, preserving the Knoll was a key goal, and you can see the Knoll behind me. Just before our 2014 OMB hearing, all the parties, the developers, the township, the MLA, and Friends of Port Carling, all agreed to protect the Knoll for parkland, if the township still desires it, whenever the developers submit a plan of subdivision. The OMB chair designated the top of the hill open space OS5. Unfortunately, the new OP doesn't mention this decision. It describes the Knoll using the same text as the 2013 OP, which predated the OMB decision. Preservation of this Knoll was a big win for the community, and it belongs in the OP. The OMB decision is also misrepresented in the new OP on Schedule B1, Port Carling land use. This very important map colors the top of the Knoll light brown, suggesting that it's zoned low-density residential. But we can fix this. In an email on Friday, I suggested that Mr. Pink add a statement acknowledging the OMB decision and the parkland option. In reply yesterday, David said he has no concerns with that proposal because it essentially states what had occurred at a subsequent OMB hearing. I thank Mr. Pink very much for his support. I ask Council to recognize the Knoll's status in the new OP, whatever way you think best. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Mr. Pink, there is a potential resolution. I believe, was that circulated at all or not?
Thank you, Worship. No, it was not circulated. At this point, I would look for direction from council as to any further changes. You hadn't heard the delegation from Mr. Spence. However, I can confirm that we did correspond through emails over the last few days. And as Mr. Spence noted, essentially what he's requested is largely a statement of fact about what occurred at a subsequent OMB decision on the zoning. And given that, I'm not concerned if council wishes to add that language. I have pre-prepared a resolution if you are considering adopting the official plan where you can include said language that's explicitly stated.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll go to Councillor Jaglowitz first.
Thank you, and through you. I certainly am supportive of your commentary, David, and I would certainly support us in indicating this on our latest version of the plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. Ditto. I just wanted to confirm that I agree.
Okay. Let me. I'm assuming that we might be in favor of this. I've got a mover and a seconder. Do we want to just put that language on the screen so that council can have a quick look at it? So this is the proposed language that Mr. Spence has proposed, and obviously Mr. Pink does not have an issue with. Well, just from a procedural perspective, I think we're going to need 2/3 to be able to put this one on the agenda because it wasn't in the published. So I'll leave it at that. I think we generally get the idea. The language is appropriate. I'm not sure any one of us, as a quick look, is going to make any changes. We do have a mover and a seconder, but I will ask that council's perspective, are we okay to read this today as it is? I see a thumbs up. We're getting lots of thumbs up. Madam Clerk, you're satisfied? We've met 2/3. Okay, then I have a resolution moved by Councillor Jaglowitz, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that Bylaw 2022-171 to adopt the draft official plan for the town.
If I could.
Okay, thank you very much. I thought this was just to strictly amend this portion. Thank you. I'll hold. Mr. Pink.
No, I think you caught exactly what I was going to say. What we've done is the actual adoption of the bylaw, of the official plan. I'm not sure if council is there yet. There are other delegates, but should council be prepared to adopt the bylaw, the resolution would include or pass the adopting bylaw. There is language there to include the what you just saw on the screen as Mr. Spence has requested. So
Okay.
I think you may want to hold off on that resolution. I don't believe 2/3 is needed either. That matter was on the agenda. It's simply a change to the resolution itself.
Okay, my apologies. I thought it was to insert this specifically into it as it's standalone. But Councillor Jaglowitz, your comment?
Thank you, Chair. I would like a clarification, if you don't mind. I'm under the assumption that this change is not a change at all. It's merely stating something that has occurred in the past, and that it is not at all making any difference to the OP, and therefore does not require circulation or any further public comment. And I raise this because it's important to me that at this late stage in the OP approval, that minor things that correct things or minor wording changes are appropriate, but policy changes are not. And I just wanted staff to confirm that this is not changing anything. It's just merely stating something that has happened in the past for clarification purposes. Is that possible?
Mr. Pink, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, yes, I would confirm that statement, Councillor Jaglowitz. Essentially, all that's been requested is essentially recognizing what occurred at a subsequent OMB decision. If you noted in Mr. Spence's delegation, there was also a question, potential request to redesignate the Knoll area itself as open space. I would caution council, I think that is a more material change that may warrant notification to that property owner. But Mr. Spence and myself have agreed that the language itself is likely sufficient, and I think that wouldn't warrant any further public notification.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards?
Yes, thank you. Could I just get clarification on this? I thought we were voting on this to add it to the official plan at this time. And then if the official plan either goes through or is delayed, it would be in it at this time. So I'd like to see this put in at this time if it's possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. What you and I were on the same page at one point that we were sort of adding it to the official plan. The understanding that I'm getting from our clerk's department and from our planning department is when we would adopt the official plan, we're adding it in at that particular point. So it's in one motion at the same time as we adopt the plan, as opposed to a separate motion to include it in and then adopt. So council has certainly suggested and been in favor right now about adding this particular item in. So we're just going to park that idea for a moment. And if we consider amending the official plan or adopting the official plan today, certainly that is going to be part of it. Are you okay with that, Councillor Edwards? Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Mr. Spence, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all.
Certain support that when the official plan gets amended, that this will be included in there. So we're going to move on to our next delegate. And I believe we have Ali Brown. We'll bring her in. Get her in the meeting. Camera's turning on. There we go. I feel like we're on Fear Factor or whatever with the cameras that move in front of people sometimes. But she connects to audio. There we go. Ali, the floor is yours. Good afternoon and welcome. Ali, you are muted, so we'll need to unmute your telephone.
Is that better there? Good afternoon, council members. Ali Brown on behalf of our Muskoka Stakeholders Association and myself as a permanent year-round resident. I'm here today to request the adoption of the new official plan not be rushed and that 30 days be given for the public to properly review the latest revisions and time to get our questions answered. Our Muskoka submission from August 9th included multiple questions and concerns, 69 specific comments referencing specific provisions of the OP that still have not been answered or addressed. We had multiple emails of support for our entire submission. On August 12th, multiple questions others raised that day. I was looking forward to seeing the answers. The memorandum provided ahead of last Monday's meeting did not include multiple submissions that were given. The public came through with really great submissions that were not addressed. This should be concerning to council. We continue to be concerned with the lack of justification and analysis taken to support the changes throughout the document. Does David Pink fully support, from a planning perspective, all aspects of this proposed plan? Why has there not been any input or comments from township staff or departments regarding the new drafts? Our asks of today: 1, that you make the decision to pause this for 30 days and request the public submissions get proper feedback on their questions and concerns, even if it is that it does not comply with policy direction. Every submission deserves a response. 2, that A2B removes the second sentence in its entirety. This proposed new plan should not prevail until approval is given by the District of Muskoka or the Ontario Land Tribunal. 3, very little justification or analysis has been completed to justify many of the proposed changes to date. One example that has been asked before but never answered is about the minimum waterfront lot frontage increase. How many new waterfront lots are created each year? What social or environmental issues are intended to be addressed by increasing the minimum lot frontage? How did the township determine that increased lot frontage would address the specific issues? This is just one example of many where the township has not spent sufficient time trying to understand the issues, the potential impacts of the proposed policy changes, or explained how the changes will address the issues. This process
I'm going to get you to try and wrap up a little bit. As a supplement, we have a couple of minutes, so thank you.
Okay. I believe more discussions can get us to the official plan we can all be proud of and stand behind. Please vote today to give the process of the plan more time, more discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Council, any questions of Ms. Brown at this point? Ali, we're good. Thank you very much. Next on deck, I believe, is Mr. Donaldson. We'll bring Sean in. Okay, Mr. Donaldson is in the meeting, camera is turned on, and we'll just get him to unmute. Good afternoon. You have 2 minutes, Sean.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Council. Thank you for my chance to speak today. For the sake of time, let's get to it. 2 of the largest concerns I have are as follows, but I have sent the other 26 concerns I have to Lauren and planning. Docks and boathouses being subject to site plan approval. I would like to commend Bryce Sharp and his planning staff and their ability to reduce site plan applications from at one time 4 months down to what is now 1 to 2 months. This leads me to my first point in my largest concern of the new OP. I understand it is part of the district OP to give direction to increase applications that are subject to site plan approval. And I also can understand why waterfront property development be subject to this process, as buildings on the waterfront often result in tree removal and disturb other aspects of the property. But it is excessive for docks and boathouses to be subject to this as well, because these types of applications have no impact on the land itself. I've asked many times to you, Council, how do you plan on ensuring the planning department specifically can process these types of applications within a timely manner? If you continue to add more and more application types for them to process, I would still like to know what plans will take place to address this issue. I would also like to note that this is the first time that I have seen inside of a council meeting where you as council have specifically addressed a concern, just like Rick Spence just brought to you, where each of you spoke to a problem that was in the township and in the OP, and each of you addressed those concerns. That is the first time that I have seen it. Every other time you let us speak, and you do not speak to our problems or concerns, you speak about your own. So I would like a 30-day period, just like has been outlined before, to actually answer the questions that we have and answer what the concerns are and how you as council will address those issues. In closing, I know this has been a long process, but I still feel as though many questions or concerns have not been addressed or answered. Why have you not specifically addressed the individuals who bring specific concerns? My final request is you please give us the regular 30-day period to process everything in this OP and give you time to answer the public's questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Council, any questions of Mr. Donaldson? Okay, thank you, Sean. Appreciate your time today. I think finally we've got Mr. Pierce. Ken's becoming a veteran here. Camera's on, audio's connected, just has to unmute. Good afternoon, Ken, and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. Ken Pierce, 2232 Muskoka Road, 169. Mr. Knight was your first speaker on October the 3rd. I refer to his letter from last night, which also refers to Planscape's resorts letter dated August 11. Great to hear from the resorts industry. He was concerned that there was no objective in support of resorts in Part B. However, in your September 22 draft, such an objective was added in section B2G and is requested and covers the main concern raised in the Planscape letter. I also note that there's 3 objectives in Part F that deal with support for resorts, F2A, B, and C. So it's in there now 4 times. I think this deals with points 1 through 6 and 17 and covers essentially a third of the comments raised in Mr. Knight's letter. The second point is he was concerned about resort policies in Part F, that they do not conform to the district OP. However, I don't think he was aware of the district's detailed comment letter dated August 29th, and it was the first item in that large 260-page deck. My reading of the current draft and the prior draft is that Mr. Pink and Mr. McDonald have addressed any and all conformity issues. If there are any that remain, I would suggest that as the final approval authority, the district will address them. That's points 8, 10, 11, 13, and 14 have been addressed. So that's another third. So 2/3 have been addressed. The last few points are I would consider not really material. Points 7 and 16 talks about having tourism assets available not only to the traveling and vacationing public, but also to the public generally. I think this has been dealt with in discussions before, especially regarding Manette, that the private property owners are not keen on having to allow the public to use their properties. It's at their choice. There were a couple of other ones. The expansion of resorts needs to be clarified was one of his comments. I don't think we can define everything. Expansion, I think, can be dealt with. So I think these are all.
I'll get you to kind of wrap up as well if we can.
Yep. No, that about covers it. I just want to say the minor changes look great. 30 plus public meetings now. I think that's extraordinary. And those are my 2 cents, or I guess my 2 minutes worth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, any questions of Mr. Pierce? Councillor Jaglowitz.
Thank you, and through you, not so much a question of Mr. Pierce. Thank you for that. But I guess my bigger concern is certainly a member of the public who's also a key member of a special interest group or self-interest group has just answered another person's queries of our official plan. And I really would have thought that the Mr. Knight referenced here would be the person who would want a response from this township. He wrote the letter to the township, and he wrote the letter in the spirit of seeking information, not unlike the others that have come before. So I would, while I appreciate Mr. Pierce's commentary, I really would want to hear from our staff and our consultants on those issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Before I kind of go to staff to kind of summarize where we're at, because I also know for those outside who are watching this, we've had a number of email submissions from people, and especially in and around Leonard Lake regarding this OP that I think we need to probably summarize and put on the table. But I'll go to Councillor Bridgman first.
Thank you, Mayor Harding.
Oh, Barb, we've just lost you for some reason. You're unmuted, but you went.
I went. Can you hear me now?
You're back.
I will get my audio fixed at some point. Sorry about that. I assume this is for general discussion. Just a couple of things, Mayor Harding, that I wanted to review and go back over, and this addresses Ms. Brown and also Mr. Knight. In terms of the transitional time period, which I believe was asked to be put in, could I ask maybe Mr. McDonald or Mr. Pink to review why we've got the wording in there as it sits, which basically is if an application comes in, it should be they should be taking note of where this official plan is going. I just think it would be helpful to get some more clarification again. I know Mr. McDonald, I believe he went through it the last time, but could I ask for that again, please?
Yeah, so I'll go to either Mr. Pink or I see, there we go, Mr. McDonald's turning it on. I think just to summarize, it's really a question around the transitional clause that was added and what happens if council approves this today. Thank you.
Great. Nick McDonald here through to Councillor Bridgman. So I did go through this last time around, but I'm happy to speak to it again. So there were a number of requests made by various members of the public wondering how this official plan would be applied to applications that are made after council adopts the official plan. And just by way of review, once council does adopt the official plan, it doesn't come into effect because there is a need for another approval authority to actually approve all or parts of that document. And the primary approval authority, of course, is the District of Muskoka. And once they make a decision, anyone is able to appeal that decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Now, they could appeal parts of the official plan, they can appeal the entirety of the official plan, but regardless, it then goes off to the tribunal for a decision. And if they make a decision that results in a change to the official plan, then the date of that decision becomes the effective date of the document. They may be asked to approve parts of the official plan and so on. It does get a little complicated. Bottom line is that the plan doesn't come into effect. So the question was asked, well, what do we do with an official plan that does change some of the rules relating to lot creation in particular? And how does that get dealt with going forward? There are also a number of other enhanced environmental policies in the official plan. There are additional requirements of applicants to satisfy these requirements as well. So what we did is came up with a transitional policy that we believe makes the most sense. It is also a policy that, in my opinion, reflects the current practice of the Ontario Land Tribunal. However, I should stress that whenever a matter is referred to the Ontario Land Tribunal, they make their own decisions based on context in terms of what policy should be applied. So I obviously can't speak for the tribunal. So what the policy does here is basically says that all applications, the official plan applies to all applications for development that have been deemed to be complete under the Planning Act the day following its approval by the District of Muskoka or the Ontario Land Tribunal. I don't think there's any argument about that. It's in effect, it should be applied. However, the policy goes on to say within the period of time between the adoption of this plan by Muskoka Lakes Council and its approval by the District of Muskoka or the Ontario Land Tribunal, regard should be had to the adopted official plan when making decisions on applications for development, particularly if the policies of the adopted official plan are more restrictive than the previous official plan. So, what does this all mean? Well, the official plan does apply restrictions on lot creation, for example, on lakes that are over the recreational carrying capacity. It increases minimum lot frontages and areas on other lakes as well in the township. There are other policies that enhance floodplain protection policies and natural hazard protection policies as well. And in my view, if a new official plan proposes policies that are more protective of the natural environment or which are intended to better protect public health and safety, then those policies should be considered when an application is submitted in this interim period. That's my opinion as a planner. Mr. Pink, I would ask him to opine on this as well, because he will be the one making recommendations to council or the Committee of Adjustment when applications are submitted. And as a consequence, all we're saying in here is that regard shall be had to the policies of the new official plan in making decisions. This leaves the door open for context to be considered on a case-by-case basis. However, in my view, if this council decides to make something more restrictive for good reason, recreational carrying capacity or for environmental reasons, then in my opinion, those policies should be applied after this plan is adopted by council. Other planners may have different opinions, other lawyers may have different opinions. However, I do understand that Mr. Pink did run this policy by Mr. Ed Balboon, who is the township solicitor, and he has confirmed that my understanding and writing of this policy is generally consistent with accepted practice in Ontario. So I take some comfort from that, but I would ask Mr. Pink to opine on this as well, as he will be the man in charge of making decisions after this plan is adopted.
Thank you,
Mr. Pink.
Can I comment? And I'll go to Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Worship, and I don't have too much more to add to Mr. McDonald's thorough explanation, other than to note that I think we heard earlier that a number of concerns weren't addressed. This was a concern of the community to add transitional provisions, and they were thus added. So I think we have demonstrated that we are trying to respond to those concerns that were raised. I think, as Mr. McDonald noted, a lot of the hardships of this policy will fall on municipal planning staff, who will have to essentially review both plans, the current official plan and the adopted plan, when making recommendations to council. And that may pose challenges from time to time. But I would note, as Mr. McDonald had the language, it doesn't state that new applications for development shall conform with or be consistent with the adopted plan, but that regard shall be had. And I share Mr. McDonald's opinion that a lot of good work was put into this plan, and where protection of the environment is of utmost importance, or protection of human health or safety, that regard should be had to the good work that was done in this plan. And to put that off for potentially 1, 2, or 3 or more years until the District of Muskoka or a tribunal approves of it, I think I struggle making that recommendation to you. I think we've tried to strike a balance here, that some regard should be had to those new policies that we've been working on for the past approximately 4 years. That helps clarify.
Okay. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you very much. And that's it to the mayor. Mr. McDonald or Mr. Pink, other municipalities have probably used the same wording in their official plans when they're coming through. I believe this isn't new. And I guess this is just like putting an interim control bylaw on to protect everything until it's finalized. And that's what's almost works the same, does it not? So as we said, we have to have regard for it. We don't have to go right to the letter, but I think this should be left in. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jaglowitz.
Excuse me, thank you, and through you, and not necessarily on this topic. I believe we're in the general discussion phase of this, if you will.
Yeah, if I can, Councillor Jaglowitz, just this topic's on the floor right now, so I'd like to kind of try and cross this out because I think it is pivotal for our discussion. Does anybody else want to comment on this at this particular time? And then I can circle back. Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. Seeing as I started the discussion, I am comfortable with this. It is take consideration. It's not an absolute, so I am good with the way it is sitting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jaglowitz.
Thank you, Chair. Might remind council, although you don't read reminding, but I do sometimes, that Planning Committee approved this official plan on October the 3rd, 1922, with a number of minor wording changes. When I received the amended plan that's before us today, I printed out every page with a change and scrutinized it against my notes from that meeting. And I was satisfied that the plan in front of council today reflects the wording changes approved by the Planning Committee a short time ago. And therefore, I believe it's appropriate to move this forward. And I would like to ask that to bring forward Bylaw 2022-171 for approval. And I would ask for a seconder for that.
Okay, Councillor Jaglowitz, first of all, that we're going to get to that. We're just discussing some of the terms within this at this particular point. We had Mr. Spence bring up a potential amendment that council has agreed with regarding the Knoll and OPA 40 or Hannah's Landing. In this particular point, I just want to have, does anybody else have any other comments on the applicability section A to B? And I guess I have a specific question if no one else does at this particular point, and maybe to Mr. Pink or Mr. McDonald. I'm trying to understand the very first sentence that this official plan, Councillor Jaglowitz, I'm going to get you to mute your microphone as well, and we can come back to you. Thank you. This official plan shall apply to all.
Before you mute me, then, will you come back to my request after you finished your agenda?
I said I would do that.
Thank you.
So A to B, this official plan shall apply to all applications for development that have been deemed complete applications the day following. I'm trying to understand that sentence a little bit more, because if somebody comes to our planning staff and would like to sever a 500-foot lot in two 250-foot parcels currently, that application, let's assume this passes today, if that application came tomorrow or it was deemed complete next week, we've yet to have this go through the district. So is it complete? Is it not complete? I'm trying to understand the scenario where a development application would be complete the day after. I would say started the day after or in process. It's actually more of a starting point than it is a completed point of the application, because I would assume that the completed point might be prior. Anyway, maybe Mr. Pink can help me just to understand what an application would be deemed complete the day after this application. I might be started afterwards. I'm just, help me here.
I'll try my best, and I don't know if Mr. McDonald might try to assist as well. But essentially, under the Planning Act, a number of planning applications provide the municipality with typically 30 days in which to review the submission and ensure that the municipality has all the information necessary in order to make an informed decision. Council ultimately an informed decision, and staff an informed recommendation to council. And the way the policy is structured is applicants would have had to submit applications approximately 30 days ago from today, should the official plan be adopted today as per the written policy. And if they had and it's deemed complete, they will only be subject to the current in effect official plan. However, applications submitted more recently within the past 30 days or starting tomorrow, regard would have to be had now for this new adopted official plan. What I can note for council is a number of applicants have reached out to the municipality that have active applications that have been submitted in the last several months, and staff has diligently worked through those and either rendered some complete or advised that there is some missing information. As I stated at the last meeting, should an application been submitted more than 30 days ago, and as a result of staff's inability to review it within 30 days, should it ultimately be found to be complete, but staff just hadn't deemed it such as of today, it would certainly be my expectation that we would honor that and wouldn't would be overly punitive in my mind to render it incomplete because of staff's inability to get to it within 30 days. But again, staff did get through a number of applications of applicants who would be caught in that window, and we have advised them of our review of those applications. Again, Mr. McDonald, if whether that helped your worship, and Mr. McDonald wishes to add further.
Okay, so just before we go to Mr. McDonald, let me just understand again, because what you just said is any applications caught or that didn't get submitted 30 days ago, they would be deemed complete today, assuming this passes today. The opening sentence talks about applications deemed complete after approval by the district or the OLT. It doesn't talk about today's council meeting. So that's where I'm having a bit of a question or a difficulty, because obviously anything afterwards, once a new plan comes into place, then that's the new plan. That's all I'm trying to understand the difference, because you explained a scenario of today's application.
Thank you, and sorry, perhaps I didn't completely get the question, but I think if you read that closely, what that's saying is then the new plan applications, the new official plan, let me just read that again. Planning Act. So basically what the second sentence is what I was referring to, where regard shall be had for new. The first sentence simply states that upon approval by the district, this official plan shall apply. So again, all applications will have to conform with, no longer just have regard to. Is that?
Okay. So, and I agree with you. It's just that first sentence. So once a plan's approved, I agree that anybody who starts a process, it's there. It's the finishing process. And this is just a, if somebody 30 days or 60 days or even 90 days ahead of the official plan adoption. So let's say this gets adopted by the district and through OLT in 6 months, a plan that could be deemed approved or started next week still has to really conform with this based on the secondary scenario. There's a whole bunch of gray area to who's approving what. I understand regard to. Anyway, if the first sentence was there, and only the first sentence, I really have okay with it. It's just the second one sort of says a question of this to me, and I'm not sure when an approval happens, but I'll leave it to everybody else. Maybe Nick, you can chime in.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Mayor, perhaps I can assist. So basically this policy deals with 3 scenarios. The first scenario is after the official plan is approved by the district or the Ontario Land Tribunal. And as you indicated, there's no argument that obviously the plan should apply to all applications, period. There's no wiggle room there, so to speak. The second category is the period of time between council adoption and the approval of the official plan. And that's where we're saying the new plan, I guess decisions will need to have regard for the new official plan when they're being made. And that's a gray area. We admit it's a gray area. It is challenging, and it will be challenging in some circumstances to apply. But it is what it is, because council is adopting a document which does change the rules in a number of different areas. And if council feels strongly about what those changes mean, then they should apply to applications. However, context is always very important, and it may not necessarily be in the public interest to apply it every time. But I can't speak to every individual application and how they get dealt with. And then, of course, we have the third category, and that is those applications that have already been deemed complete. They get dealt with under the previous policy regime, and no regard is had to the adopted official plan as well. And Mr. Pink has indicated there may be a few applications where the township didn't get around to deeming something complete, and Mr. Pink has indicated that there will be some flexibility applied in those circumstances to clear those up, so that there's clarity in terms of what official plan should apply and whether regard is needed to the new official plan or not.
Okay, so let me just further one quick question then. So 2 months from now, someone comes in, a zoning bylaw amendment wants to divide 500 feet. We turn them down because we wouldn't allow that. You'd have to have a 300-foot lot. Fast forward 6 months, and that whole section, or what is under appeal, goes to OLT, and the OLT says you can do 300-foot lots, wherever that is. Where does that leave this township from an exposure perspective until the district approves something or OLT?
So that's a great question, and it's probably a question best answered by your solicitor, because I'm not a lawyer in dealing with exposure. But that's why we put in the words "regard shall be had." And I think if there's a concern about the increased lot frontage requirements not being upheld by the District of Muskoka or the Ontario Land Tribunal, then I think the planning department would take that into account in making recommendations. Ultimately, it's up to the Committee of Adjustment to make decisions. Those decisions may be different than what has been recommended to them as well. So there are a number of factors in play going forward, and that's why we can't say it shall apply or it shouldn't apply. There is a gray area, we agree. Every municipality that updates an official plan goes through this and has to deal with this, so this is not unique to Muskoka Lakes. And what we've done here is try to provide some rules around it, but we can't be definitive. We just can't, because every application should be dealt with based on the context that applies and what the circumstance is, what the new rules are compared to the existing rules. Will hardship be created? There's all kinds of things to think through at the end of the day, and there's no way we can be definitive at this point.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I think that's where, we talked about the last meeting, the clergy principle, that typically until it's approved, it's not necessarily in effect. Just one question of staff, and then I'm happy to move on. Mr. Pink, in particular, A2B, and talking about this transitional provision that basically this plan is, for all intents and purposes, coming into effect today. Has this been vetted through our lawyers to confirm the applicability and ability for us to implement this?
Thank you, Your Worship. As Mr. McDonald stated, I did run A2B by the Township Solicitor to confirm and get a better understanding. As Mr. McDonald stated, this is not unique to the Township of Muskoka Lakes. Every municipality that passes a new official plan is caught in this interim period and with questions. And he concurred essentially with Mr. McDonald's finding and did not raise an objection to the draft language before you. Essentially, at the end of the day, as Mr. McDonald stated, should future appeals be received, the tribunal will decide what the tribunal will decide as to the weight put on this plan. And we can't tie their hands or be definitive. But to essentially answer your question, yes, it was run by the solicitor, and he's comfortable with the language as drafted.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jaglowitz has asked for the resolution to move forward, but I want to, before we go there, and I'm not discounting that, is there any other comments or questions that council have at this particular time? Councillor Jaglowitz.
Thank you. I guess my question is one little more fundamental. So I guess my challenge is going to be the question here of, I suppose, David and Nick. Very specifically, is there any allowance for us to actually pull one whole section or reference piece out of this? Or that being, let's suppose that I have a real problem with a particular issue in a particular article or category. If there were enough of us here at this meeting to agree to pull something out, could the document still move on with that removed from the document? I'm happy to give you an example if you'd like. I guess what I would say is I'm feeling incredibly uncomfortable with the small lake plans as it relates to Leonard Lake. And I am, I've been listening, I've been part of this. I just don't know how, I mean, talk about imposing your will. When you don't have a consensus, when you don't have, forget a majority, when you don't have a reasonable group together that you're about to impose on a whole lake property, I'm feeling very uncomfortable with that. And, you know, my sense is we don't know enough about small lake plans quite yet that I would be quite happy to remove that piece from this official plan for further study and discussion. And yet I could feel very comfortable moving the rest of this forward today. If that's embedded in this today, I don't think I can support this plan, not only today and not pushing it to next month. I would simply wait for the next council. So, I mean, I'm feeling strongly enough about that. I'm also almost feeling as strongly about the resort piece, which, while I understand our own staff of, you know, love you guys, I trust you, have for years. I am not feeling comfortable when I see a constituent who's living and breathing this whole resort piece, and he provides what is an incredible document, and we pretty much, you know, it gets dismissed by the Muskoka Lakes Association, and even our own staff says, yeah, you know, I don't believe I can support this today because of those two examples and those two reasons. And so I would ask that question. The higher question then is, if we were to remove, with the interest to remove a section or a part of a subsection, could this document still have its life today and move on? That's my question.
Mr. Pink, what's your suggestion for this? I think we've got two clear examples that Councillor Jaglowitz may not support today, but David?
Thank you. Through you, short answer is yes. Sections could be removed. Obviously, the implications of doing that will depend on the specific section. Section F in particular will pose, similar to the transitional provisions we just debated, will pose challenges with interpretation and recommendations going forward, as the existing policies will still be in effect. But in regard to the Leonard Lake plan, I think that would be relatively straightforward, to be honest. Those are additional, very specific policies, or relatively brief policy set that could be removed, and Leonard property owners on Leonard Lake would be subject to all the other policies in the official plan, and nothing would prevent the lake associations from coming forward with an official plan amendment, you know, to review those lake specific policies at a future date. So certainly it wouldn't mean that they couldn't come forward and continue the discussion. So I believe that section would be relatively easily removed without, you know, difficult, you know, interpretation or implications to doing so to review future applications.
Okay. Councillor Bridgman. Okay, sorry, before I go back to you, Barb, one quick second. Councillor Jaglowitz, you had a follow-up question?
Well, thank you, and through you, I guess then it would just follow, is there any appetite? And again, so I'm not sure what, you know, how do we actually go through that process of, you know, assessing the appetite of this committee, this council, to extricate, you know, 1, 2, 3 items, pick a number, and remove them, and then we would go to that fulsome vote. I think that would be a very difficult, I'm sensing a very difficult hurdle. And I
So
guess
that's-
that's a
That's
rhetorical
my challenge as chair, how we may move that forward, but just hold on a moment and I'll circle back with some other questions. Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. Couple of things. Well, first of all, to Councillor Zavitz's question about Leonard Lake. This association that is the official one in my terms has been around for a long time. They have done all of the research for their lake plan. We have heard from a few people on Leonard Lake who didn't ever give us any documentation to back up what they were saying. And so I am very comfortable letting this move forward. If that group wants to challenge it at OLT or at the district, they can, but I am in support of the Leonard Lake plan in our official plan. Part two, if I might, Mayor Harding, a couple of clarifications in terms of the resort, and this does reflect back to the letter that we got last night, because then I was unclear. So I'm going to ask probably Mr. Pink or Mr. McDonald. I have two questions on this. The first one is on staffing, which was brought up. I understood that we had a little bit of what I would call wiggle room from our official plan in terms of how many staff on a piece of property. And so my question would be, for a single owner, smaller resort, if the owners are on property all the time, does that designate as staff? And maybe I'll hold my second question until that one gets answered.
Mr. Pink.
Thank you, Your Worship. To respond, I think, to the earlier question simply about process, should council wish to remove any section, it would simply be added to the resolution, similar to Mr. Spence's addition. So again, leave the procedure with the Clerk's Department and myself. That can easily be done. With respect to the question, I don't have the policy directly in front of me, but I believe when it comes to staff housing, it is compulsory. However, it is commensurate with the scale and size of the resort. So I believe there's certainly some flexibility there, where if you have a relatively small mom and pop style resort and the owners reside on the property as they're permitted to do, I think staff would, again, of course, context is everything in details, but at that sort of high level scenario, I think staff and the policy set would allow, that residence for the owner operator to function as staff housing. And I think that would satisfy that policy.
Follow up, Mayor Harding?
Yep.
Okay, so then my next question is, I think I'm under the understanding that the specifics that we put in place for basically our condominium developments being very close to the Minette, 7 days rental, you have to have a furniture package, or I did not think that was applying to the smaller resorts. I thought that was more the condominium type development. So I just need clarification on whether that 7-day minimum is supposed to apply to all of our commercial resorts. I don't think it does, but I need to have that clarified.
Mr. Pink, maybe?
I'm not sure if Mr. McDonald will be able to answer off the top of his head. In fairness, receiving the letter late yesterday, I haven't had time through General Finance this morning to go through it in detail. However, what I can suggest is if there are valid concerns that more detailed prescriptive policies that would be typical for a larger condominium development would not work for smaller resorts. Typically what would occur, there's still opportunity to make modifications. The district may very well make modifications prior to their approval. Mr. Knight's submission can be forwarded to them, and we can work with, likely be able to work with the district through their approval process to make any necessary adjustments to ensure that things like a furniture, fixtures, and equipment program are not mandatory for every resort operation, but it's commensurate to the scale of the resort. So again, unless there's really more time to go through that submission and the policy set in detail, it's difficult to answer off the top of my head. However, there is an opportunity to make further changes. And again, I don't know if Mr. McDonald is maybe be able to provide a bit more detail than I, if he's had more time to review the letter.
Okay, I'll go to Nick.
Yeah, so I have reviewed the letter again rather quickly. It came a little late. I can say that there are some good suggestions in that letter that would that I think could lead to some minor changes in the wording in the official plan to make it clear. I can tell council now that a lot of these policies are designed for the condominium form of tenure, and they're intended to make it clear that the resort continues to be operating as a commercial development. So a lot of these policies are geared to that. The plan strongly supports single ownership resorts, and I can't see some of these requirements applying to them because they are single ownership resorts. I'm happy to make that clarity, to make that clear in a public setting like this, which I know this is being recorded and folks watch these recordings, and I'm happy to make that clear in this forum. I do think some minor changes can be made to the official plan to reflect that. And Mr. Pink has outlined a way that that can happen through the district approval process. And I'm perfectly happy to do that. I do think there were some good suggestions in there to clarify how the policies work with single ownership resorts. To be quite frank, a lot of the focus through this process has been on those resorts that go through plan of condominium applications, because that's where almost all of the conversation has been historically on resorts. And we've spent a lot of time trying to figure that part out. But in no way were some of those policies intended to apply to the types of resorts that are considered desirable in the township, which are those single ownership resorts that have been here for a long time and continue to contribute to the local economy. We want to support those operations as much as we can, and it wasn't our intent to place limitations on how they operate.
Okay. I'm going to go to Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Harding. Just a couple of things. I came into this with some questions that came out of Greg Knight's piece from yesterday. It was, really well written and well documented and provoked a lot of thought. I can tell you, I've gone through my checklist, and between Mr. McDonald, Mr. Pink, and I think even some of the stuff Mr. Pierce submitted, I've satisfied most, all of my questions have been covered off. So I really want to just address the suggestion or the question raised by my friend, Mr. Councillor Jaglowitz. I really don't think we should be picking this apart and setting parts aside for a later date. In all honesty, we will never achieve unanimity. I think the best we can hope for is to build consensus, to make sure we've covered all of the bases, to make sure that we've asked all the pertinent questions, to make sure, as I suggested I am now, that we've considered the responses and we're comfortable that we have a document that in its entirety is ready for consideration and ready for approval. And always we overlay that with what's in the best interest of the township. So I understand that is some discomfort with some of the issues. I've managed to hear enough to answer the questions that I came in here with, and I really would discourage any idea that we're going to pull pieces off of it and approve just what's left. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. And a question to you. I'm going to speak to the Leonard Lake issue, but I think we should make sure that Councillor Edwards and Councillor Mazan that they want to speak on the resort. They should go first before me.
Okay, I'll pause on Leonard Lake and Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of comments. I would leave the resorts alone and that. And as far as the lake plans, I would not be pulling them out, whether it's Leonard Lake, 3 Mile Lake, or anything else like that. Over the last 12 years that I've been on council, I have been going to the annual general meetings at Leonard Lake, 3 Mile Lake, and other lakes as well. I've seen a packed house, 60, 70, 80 people at them. And that's so I'm assured that the lake plan they've come up with, not only that, at the annual general meetings that they do have, they've had people from the district talking on lake health. They've had talking on water quality and everything else. That these people have studied it. They've come up with the plan. If we do remove it and they have to add for it to be added in, it's going to cost them a lot of money. These volunteers have put a lot of time into it. I would leave it. There still is the appeal period if people don't like it. But as I think it was Councillor Kelly said, you're never going to please everyone all of the time. So I would leave it in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mazan.
Thank you. And through you, similar to Councillor Edwards, I would leave the lake plans in. They've done a lot of work, and I think they've done their work to this point. So I'm satisfied with leaving that in. The second questions I had around the resorts, you know, like all of us, we've probably read through last night's missive a number of times. And I think the one piece that I want to have assurance, and Nick, you did talk to it, you said, you know, a large part of the focus has been on the condominiumized approach to the resorts. One comment or line in the letter was talking to the importance of public engagement and having meaningful participation by the resort owners, their managers and staff. And just assurance that as this goes forward to the district, there's an opportunity for Mr. Knight and or others to continue to ensure that the resorts in the, and I'm talking now within the township of Muskoka Lakes, this is our approach that's embedded in our official plan as it is right now. There's still this opportunity to refine it and ensure that these resorts are an important and part of our history and culture and economy moving forward. Because that was one of the themes that as I was reading it through, that seemed to kind of leap out, that maybe one point ensuring that, you know, they're an important and viable part of our economy, but second of all, that those that may not have the ability, means, or interest to be able to come and participate in the conversation are actually still having an opportunity to do so.
Nick?
Yes, through you to Councillor Mazan. My door is always open to having conversations with anybody about making sure this plan meets the township's objectives. As I mentioned, some of the suggestions made by Mr. Knight, I think, are good. We did make an effort in response to the previous submission to include an objective in an earlier section of the official plan dealing with resorts. We actually had a conversation about that at the last planning committee meeting where we talked about the wording of that. And I explained why it was important to put that up front. Mm-hmm. So I think we're on the same page in terms of wanting to be clear. And certainly there are a few things raised that I think could merit some minor wording changes to the official plan. There is a process to do that. I will say that if there are any changes proposed after council adopts it, that the council wishes to put forward for the district to consider, then we have to come back to this council, have a conversation about that and get that clarity and obviously a resolution of support. So there would be time for a fulsome conversation. I don't think the changes are significant, but I think they would be helpful to respond to those concerns raised.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rhodes, before I go to Leonard Lake, I just want to have one just comment or question from Mr. McDonald on the resort policy, because you've suggested that there are some changes you believe should be made, which are appropriate. I've also heard we could make those changes at the district before that approval. But let's come back to A to B, where as soon as we adopt this today, we're under the new regime as it's written here, not with those particular changes. I know we can give consideration to it, but I'm just trying to, if you can think of some changes that should be made, should we not be sending our best efforts to the district for adoption? So I'm not sure you want to comment on that.
That's a great question, Mr. Harding, and that's why we have the shall have regard to. And, you know, the policies on resorts are quite involved. They're quite detailed. We don't have a live application at the moment. It takes time to come up, to develop applications. And even before applications are submitted, there are many discussions with the township typically held to figure out, you know, what are they applying for? What will make sense? What do the new policies say, and so on. So I'm not too concerned about how the policies apply in this interim period. But if they are changed, they certainly would be positive for those folks who have made those comments. So I'm not too concerned about that. So I guess I'm not concerned about that, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts. Leonard Lake.
Thank you, Chair. And before I begin, I would like to seek clarification from Councillor Jaglowitz on his comments on Leonard Lake, and that from his perspective or his opinion is that there was not a consensus reached. Is that am I clear, Councillor Jaglowitz?
Councillor Jaglowitz, I'll let you go down that road just quickly. I don't want to go too far down this road, but
I don't plan on going down too far. And quite honestly, it could just as well be, the whole notion of small lake plans. It's one thing that I guess has been niggling at me for the longest of times. I'm not saying I don't agree with small lake plans. I think it's great. I just think it's very, very difficult to get a large number of people together to agree on some things which are going to affect everyone on that lake. And I just think it's a bit overreaching at this point in time. And I'm not going to get into this, the whole thing about all the people and who's for, who's against, et cetera. Mm-hmm. I'm just suggesting that small lake plans, it could be argued, RCC, we should talk about that before we just embed it in this thing, but I'm not suggesting that. I'm simply saying small lake plans, using Leonard Lake as an ideal example of, I don't think it's working, to be honest. Count the number of cottages. Well, no, count the number of cottages that are on that lake, and versus how many are being spoken on behalf of in this plan. Maybe you could clarify that.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. That was a beautiful introduction to what I have to say. So first of all, I'm going to remind Council of the information we've heard about Leonard Lake from the Leonard Lake Stakeholders Association. Leonard Lake, just to answer Councillor Jaglowitz, Leonard Lake has approximately 162 distinct waterfront properties. The Leonard Lake Stakeholder Association communicated that in their 2022-2023, this summer, paid membership is 112. The Leonard Lake Stakeholder Association has also communicated that they allow only one vote per property owner, regardless of the number of properties owned. So the 112 could be much higher. I will remind Council that in the Lake Plan section of the OP, section E81B, it states that lake plans are intended to provide a greater level of detailed policies for specific lakes in the township. Each plan is intended to reflect the individual character of a specific lake and are prepared by ratepayer or property owner organizations that represent a significant number of property owners within the lake and the associated watershed. Given that there is 162 distinct water properties on Leonard Lake, and given that the LLSA have a paid membership in 2022-23 of 112, and given that they've been incorporated and have done so much since 2004, I suggest to council that LLSA represent a significant number of property owners within the lake as stipulated in E8B. I'd also like to state that the few emails that were received since October 3 opposing Leonard Lake plan have to be considered in association with the 76 property owners who voted in favor of the lake plan. A few emails should not be outweighed by the 76%. I must also remind Council that the Leonard Lake Stakeholders Association communicated that they went out and painstakingly tried to contact every property to get them involved in the survey. And 90% were contacted. They managed to talk to 96 of the 166 property owners, but only 76 elected to be in the process. You can't drag someone in the process. But it's loud and clear, 112 paid up members, and you had 76 working on the lake plan. I think they have a consensus. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Councillor Jaglowitz, one more comment, certainly.
Yeah, and I apologize for the confusion. At no point in time am I questioning the consensus of anyone at Leonard Lake. 150, that leaves a third of the people not participating. And that's my concern on any small lake. And that's been my experience in Torrance Bay and Bala Bay. Not everyone participates. And when you only have, let's call it 2/3, and then yet you're working on plans for the whole lake that are going to affect every single person. I just think that's really, I'm not thinking it's overreaching, but it's far reaching. So taking the emotion out of it, Councillor Roberts, I'm not debating anything with you. I'm simply saying that I think if we're going to enforce something like this, put something like this into force, that there needs to be a much larger majority of people, or else we're going to have what we're experiencing now. Thank you.
Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. And through you, sorry, I missed the first part. I assume that the request from Rick Spence for the Knoll to be included in the OP has gone through. And then I've heard that there are perhaps some good changes that we could make to our resort piece prior to it going to the district, which I think is a good idea because it should go as clean as possible. Would it be possible to defer passing this today, get a clean document for November's council meeting and pass it then? That's what I would be requesting, because if we're doing changes on the fly to a document that really should come to council clean and then go forward, I would feel more comfortable if we did it that way.
Okay, so that's your perspective of a 30-day pause, if you will, and that we can also have Mr. McDonald implement his requested changes or thoughts on the resort policy. I'm not seeing any other hands right now. I will suggest I would somewhat support Councillor Jaglowitz' comments about Leonard Lake, and knowing that there are 76 people who voted in favor, but knowing that there's 160 plus properties, we don't have a majority of people who voted in favor on the lake. I do agree that a number of people and apathy tends to be, you know, you didn't hear from me, so I don't really care. But there obviously is some discrepancy on the lake, and you know, I would also, I'm going to suggest support Councillor Hayes' perspective. We've heard from the public they'd like a 30-day pause. They'd like to fully understand it. We've heard that there could be some resort changes, and maybe we'll hear some more from others in Leonard Lake before we don't. I'm not necessarily opposed to putting it in, but I'm just still always question, as I know Councillor Hayes, Nishikawa, and myself 8 days ago suggested, let's just wait a full 30 days before we understand this. So I'm not going to call a question at this point. I see Councillor Jaglowitz' hand is in the air, and then I will go forward.
Thank you, Chair. I assume you're getting back to me. Is that correct?
So, okay. Yeah, I think, well, your hand's in the air. First of all, I know that your question was you wanted to vote on this today. I'm just trying to get a sense of people want to pause or not, but I will come back to you at this point.
Well, yeah, it's not a question. I have moved, let's put it formally, that bylaw 2022-171 come forward and be approved, and with the amendment that staff and the opponents have worked out with the Knoll. I have no objection to that. As Councillor Hayes was not here, that was talked about but not actually dealt with at that time. So I'd appreciate if there was a seconder for my motion. And
okay, before Councillor Jaglowitz, before we ask that question, I appreciate you've asked that question. I want to confirm.
No, it's not a question. I'm making a motion.
I appreciate that, Councillor Jaglowitz. I just want to ask a question of our clerk that before a seconder put up their hand on your motion, they may want to consider. And that is, Madam Clerk, that if that motion goes on this floor and this motion is turned down, that we do not move forward with this bylaw for our official plan, because we are in council, it will be 6 months before this official plan bylaw can be reconsidered. I just want to confirm that before, because as soon as the seconder goes on this motion, there's no pause, there's no 30 days, there's no tweaks. It is going to be read. And that, Councillor Jaglowitz, please let me help guide council in this regard to make sure we do not potentially overstep and make a mistake. Madam Clerk, maybe you'd like to comment what would happen if this resolution gets read, or gets as requested to be put on the floor right now. And thank you.
Thank you. And through you, any member has the right to call a question, but it is once a motion is voted on and defeated by council, I believe it's 3 months in our procedural bylaw, but let me double check that number anyway. It's a pause that it can't be reconsidered.
Okay, you corrected me. It is 3 months, I believe. So when we find that, but so Councillor Jaglowitz, there's no question. You are welcome to put that on the floor. We do have a resolution in our package that is to be debated, but I'm going to turn to council right now and ask if there's anybody who wanted to support Councillor Jaglowitz's seconding of reading this immediately, is what he has put on the floor. Councillor Nishikawa, your hand is up. I'm not sure it's to speak. I think it came up, or did you want to support Councillor Jaglowitz?
No, I wanted to have more a clearer understanding, because much like you, I was having that 3 month period. I went to the 3 months, not to the 6 months, which is at district. But more importantly, I guess the question would be to Councillor Jaglowitz, are you suggesting that we stop all dialogue at this point to move your motion forward?
Yeah, so I believe that Councillor Jaglowitz would like to put this on the floor.
May I respond to that, Chair?
You may.
In no way am I trying to stop discussion. I thought the chair was moving on to another subject. So I would just like this question dealt with before we move on to another subject. Please discuss it as long as you want. I've got all day. I think we should all be comfortable with it. But I don't think deferring it is the right way to go. I think we've done the best we can. I think staff's explained how they'll deal with it going forward. I think it's time to call the question. But if you want more discussion, please go ahead. Please, I will not. I got the sense that the chair might just skip by it. In fact, you know what? I'm comfortable, Mr. Chair. If you want to, I can withdraw it and bring it up at the end, as long as you agree to allow me to bring it forward before this meeting adjourns.
Okay, so Councillor Jaglowitz, let me just first and foremost suggest this is on the agenda to be discussed. There's no deferring anything at this particular point. When we get it to a topic, a councillor may want to defer the vote on it, and that's at that particular point. But right now we are discussing the official plan contemplated within there.
I trust you that you will call the question before this meeting ends, and therefore I will let you do it in your order, sir.
Okay, Councillor Bridgman.
I think I understand all that now, Mayor Harding.
Okay.
I just wanted to, I do not wish to defer this, Mayor Harding, but I'm assuming you are going to do some sort of a straw vote. And certainly I don't want this defeated so it can't come back for 3 months. But I just, and my comments right now, I would like to vote on it today and have the resort part carry on to the district for their consideration afterwards.
Okay, thank you. And that's fine. I'm going to go either way from I'll call it a safety perspective. If we vote on a deferral, first of all, that can defeat, and then we're going to call the question on the specific. If we did it in the reverse order, we might not get to the deferral question. It may get split down. That was what I was trying to advise Councillor Jaglowitz by putting it on the floor at that time. But I'm going to come back to Councillor Hayes and Mazan, and then we may take a quick break and then come back to the question. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, and through you. I noticed that Mr. McDonald talked earlier on intention. By having an amendment, we're all hearing the intention of what that amendment is going to be. My comfort level is to see a finished OP, no more changes. This is it. We vote on it. It's probably one of the most important documents that we will produce. It's going to be official for 25 years. I think we should put a clean one forward and vote on that. So I would like to see it brought up, deferred, and a clean version with any suggestions that Mr. McDonald might want to include as he's heard the discussion today for the November council meeting.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to pause that as a topic of discussion momentarily, but let's hear some other comments first of all. Thank you, Councillor Mazan.
Thank you, and through you. You know, I think the document itself is quite clean. I think the questions that came up through last night's communication are the thing that we're probably all just wanting to make sure we have a process to ensure that, so I guess I just would like to go back to staff if I could and just ensure that I understood that the district, and I'm now specifically talking about the resorts, what the process would be to have this as part of an ongoing conversation or tweaking at the district level, if required.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pink.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, just so that everyone is aware, if the adopting bylaw is passed and the new official plan is adopted, it will be forwarded to the District of Muskoka. Should be abundantly clear that it's no longer then ultimately in your hands. It becomes a district matter and it's ultimately their decision. However, I could never guarantee anything to you, but it is my experience, and Mr. McDonald can comment as well, that, you know, should additional modifications be needed or matters addressed, there is an opportunity likely to work with them on those modifications. So if through Mr. Knight's letter, there are some enhancements or improvements we can make to address concerns, we can likely work with district staff to include those modifications. But again, the official plan won't be before you. It'll be before district council will ultimately make the decision to approve. It largely depends on our working relationship, which my experience has always been good, but I can't speak ultimately any further on that. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick comment, and that Councillor Hayes was right. This is going to be a living document for 25 years, but we actually review it every 5 years, I believe. So it can be changed, and that's not written in stone for 25 years, and that because it's reviewed all along. And as far as changes, even if we defer it for 30 days, somebody's going to say, but I think of this or that. As was stated, district can now change this. What I would like to see is everyone put their hand up after the break and say that they would either like to make it forward or not, then we'll know it's going to go through. It's quite simple. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually thinking about maybe doing it before the break, just as we, the topic is hot on the table at this particular point. Just a quick straw poll. Councillor Hayes has suggested a 30-day pause on this at this particular point to be able to insert the appropriate language that Mr. McDonald has talked about from a resort policy that would be here at the township level. And maybe I can get a straw poll who would support a 30-day pause to bring this back to council in November. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to chime in on that for 4. So that does not go forward. So we are then, council, going to vote on this today. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to go right ahead and do this. And it is the resolution, Mr. Pink. Direct, Mr. Pink.
Thank you, Worship. And sorry to interrupt and perhaps muddy the water a little bit, but I feel obligated to inform you. I did receive an email from the agents of the Hannah's Landing property, and they are objecting to this last minute change. Again, apologize to muddy the waters, but I feel it should inform council. Again, in my opinion, my review of the requested amendment, it is largely a statement of fact. It simply references what the OMB decided at a later date. However, the owners are apparently taking exception to that last second change, just so that council is aware.
Okay. Mr. Pink, you believe we're okay with that? I'll go to Councillor Jaglowitz on this particular topic because the question is, do we insert this or not? Councillor Jaglowitz.
So I moved on to something else, but I would ask for a recorded vote. Thank you.
Okay, on the particular adoption, that's fine. I'm just trying to figure out, Councillor Mazan, are you voting or you're just in favor of a recorded vote? Don't need anybody in favor.
No, I'm not voting or anything else, seeking clarity. I think I need to understand a little bit further what this means about the Dunal.
Okay.
So is it possible for us to take a 10-minute break?
I was actually just at this point, considering the Dunal has now reared its head, I think we'll get Mr. Pink. We'll take a quick 10-minute break, and we're going to circle back here at 10 to the hour. And Mr. Pink can give us his recommendation about the NOL going forward. That's okay. Thank you. Councillor Jaglowitz, a question before we go to break?
Yes, just a question. I think, Mr. Chair, due to this late knowledge, I think that we should separate these two questions. I think it might be simpler. I'd suggest when you come back that we vote, we figure out a way to vote on the official plan going forward without the amendment, and then have a separate vote to include the amendment, or vice versa, whichever way it works out, so that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater because of this late thing. And it's just another example of why I don't think a deferral is appropriate. These last minute things are going to continue to come in. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We will see you all in 10 minutes. Okay, let's try and get everybody back. Councillor Jaglowitz, Councillor Edwards, Ishikawa, and Mazan. Okay, Councillor Jaglowitz, I'm sure you're going to want to be here for this discussion. So hopefully you can come back. Okay, and maybe I'll get Mr. Pink to turn on his camera because I think we're going to go to Mr. Pink at this particular point. For those who were paying attention just before the break, we have received an email from the property owner of Hannah's Landing concerned about the last minute addition. Mr. Pink, maybe you want to comment on your perspective on this, and or maybe there's an opportunity to handle this the same way as we're looking at handling resort policies. So Mr. Pink.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I indicated to Mr. Spence, I don't necessarily feel the requested addition or inclusion of the added language is of necessarily any great benefit. It is largely a statement of fact. I know I can't speak for Mr. Spence, but I sense a lot of the concern is that municipal staff or a future council may not recall prior OMB decisions or the zoning in place on the property. On one hand, I can assure you that any municipal planner or staff will review prior approvals if any future application comes in. But nonetheless, even should the municipality forget the history of the property, any subdivision or condominium approval in the future is a public process, and any neighboring property owner will be able to engage in that process and certainly remind council of past decisions and the interest in preserving the Dunal property. So I apologize for somewhat of a non-committal or two-sided answer, but I don't necessarily see any great need or benefit to including it. But with that said, I also don't see any great harm in including it either. It is essentially just a statement of fact. So I question why the property owner would be that concerned with including it, as it largely just stipulates what the OMB decided in October of 2014. I suspect, and again, I certainly can't speak for the property owner, but it may very well be that in fairness, they did not have time to thoroughly review the language. It was shown on the screen for a few seconds, and I can certainly appreciate their hesitation in bringing it up at the late moment. So those are my thoughts. I hope they're helpful for council. One option, as Your Worship did note, potentially you could deal with it similarly to Mr. Knight's letter, in that Mr. Spence makes a submission, or can certainly delegate to the District of Muskoka when they are considering approval of the plan. They can consider those modifications as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be included today. So I hope that answer helps, and I'm available to answer any further if council has.
Okay, council, any questions? Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. Mr. Pink, help me with the history because I wasn't on council at the time, but it seems to me the Manette settlement through what was then the OMB, somehow part of that didn't make it into our official plan, and that became an issue. And so that's my understanding. And if that's the case, then I want this to be in the official plan. So a little history lesson, please.
Mr. Pink.
Thank you. I think that's a very different situation if referring to the Manette policies. What happened there, and I like to believe that's certainly a rare instance, is yes, there was a settlement at the then OMB on the Manette policies. Coincidentally, at the exact same time or very shortly thereafter, the township was also reviewing its official plan, and unfortunately, the wrong version of the settlement was inserted into the official plan. A public meeting was had on that wrong version and was ultimately adopted and approved and was never noticed until many years later. That's certainly not the situation with Hannah's Landing. Those OMB decisions are from the past. We have taken them verbatim from the current OP and inserted them in the current draft. What Mr. Spence has asked is actually referencing a later zoning OMB decision, not the official plan decision. So again, that's a different situation. A wrong policy set, I believe, was inadvertently inserted through the Minette process.
Okay, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, I would like it left in, and my reasoning for that is it should have been left in. It's amazing how the planners, and not yourselves, our planning staff, can work around things. If you look at N2, the zoning bylaw, once the official plan is approved and in effect, no zoning bylaw can be passed by council that does not conform with this plan. That's why I would like it left in. The OMB really marked it out that was open space and would have to be changed. And if a future council want to change it, that's fine. And that because it stipulates in the official plan all the housing and everything else like that, but it never stated the other. And by just mentioning the OMB hearing in it, that clarifies it. And that owner knew what the OMB hearing was. Thank you.
Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. I'm just going to agree with Councillor Edwards. I would like to give the people that presented this at the OMB a little bit of comfort. And if all it takes is just to include the OMB decision in our OP, then that's fine. I would be supporting that.
Okay, just before I go forward here, I'm going to ask everybody straw poll in favor of leaving this in. We voted on it earlier to put it in, but those people who want to leave 1, 2, 3, that is going to remain in. We have a path forward. Okay, we have now we're going to consider our draft official plan. I'll read the resolution. I heard Councillor Jaglowitz has asked for a recorded vote, so I'll read it and then pass it over to our clerk to administer, but it's moved by Councillor Jaglowitz, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that Bylaw 2022-171 to adopt the draft official plan for the Township of Muskoka Lakes attached as Appendix 2 to Report Plan 2022-214 as amended by the following, and this is the insertion of the Hannah's Landing, that a new section I-549G be added to state on October 15th, 2014, the Ontario Municipal Board, through its decision on case number PL 130936, rezone the top of the knoll as open space, or OS5, in light of the then council's interest in preserving the prominent hill as a public park. If a future council chooses not to assume this area as parkland at the time of subdivision or condo approval, the zoning of this shall revert to the community residential holding, or R7H zone. With that amendment, we would like to read the draft township plan be read a first, second, third time, and finally passed, and that the draft official plan and its associated record be forwarded to the District of Muskoka for approval.
I'm going to call for the recorded vote. Councillor Bridgman. Sorry.
Would help if I turn my mic on. Sorry. Yes.
Councillor Edwards.
Yes.
Councillor Hayes.
Yes.
Councillor Jaglowitz.
Yes.
Councillor Kelly.
Yes.
Councillor Mazan.
Yes.
Councillor Nishikawa.
No.
Councillor Roberts.
Yes.
Councillor Jaglowitz. You're muted.
Nay.
And Mayor Harding.
Okay, let's see if we can do this without echoing back over there. Now you can hear me. We can go back to my phone. I am going to vote against this from a process perspective and some concerns about some of our small lakes. But there are tons of really good ideas within this plan, and I'm happy that it's moving forward. But there are some other red herrings in there that I don't believe are appropriate from a transparency perspective, and a process that this council would like to follow. So, but it is moving forward. That is passed, Madam Clerk. Mr. Pink, Mr. McDonald, thank you very much for all your hard work, and also to the general public. This has been a long process. Obviously, not everybody going to be happy with this moving forward because there's some contemplated changes, but it certainly is a environment first path forward for the Township of Muskoka Lakes, and look forward to continuing feedback from the district and the public as this moves forward. So thanks also to all of council to moving this forward. Okay, that one is done. And we are going to move on, and I'm going to get back to our regular programming. Zoning bylaws, Hunter and Major, and I believe we have a delegation to this regard. If I go back to my first, and that is Darcy is coming to join us. Don't know what the paperwork is, but regarding Hunter Major application. And actually, you know what? I'll get staff to introduce it first. Thank Caitlin, if you can do that, Ms. Walker, and then Mr. Dunal, I'll let you speak to it afterwards. But Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, everyone. Just to remind Council, in August, Planning Committee heard zoning bylaw amendment applications at BA 11/22, Bylaw 2022-52 in the name of Hunter and Major. The subject property is known municipally as 1 Norman Island, Unit M59. Bylaw 2022-52 will have the effect of permitting the following, including the demolition of an existing boathouse and associated docks, the construction of a new dock and 2-story boathouse, recognizing as-built additions to the dwelling, as-built additions to a sleeping cabin, as-built to sun deck addition, as-built stairs, and as-built shed, and the demolition of a treehouse and platform. There are a number of exemptions required to address the above list, and I'm happy to provide a further explanation of any of those exemptions at the request of Council. The application was heard by Council in September. During that meeting, the applicant had requested that the as-built shed be permitted to remain in the existing location. Council deferred third reading so that the details of the as-built shed could be finalized and the site plan updated. The site plan has now been revised and staff have no concerns with the proposed shed location. This site plan has been attached to the agenda package. If Council is considering approval of the application, the following minor amendments have been recommended. First, the removal of the exemptions related to the sun deck additions off the north side of the dwelling/veranda. 2, an updated exemption to permit sleeping cabin number 1 to have a reduced floor area of 731 square feet. 3, an updated exemption to permit an as-built shed to be 43 feet from the high water mark. And 4, any related necessary technical revisions, including Schedule 2 to Bylaw 2022-052. No new submissions were received since the last council meeting, and I have no further comments, but I'm happy to assist with any questions on this one.
Okay, Ms. Walker, thank you very much. And Mr. Dunal, over to you. Just need you to unmute yourself. There we go.
There we go.
First challenge.
Yes, always. I'll get the hang of it in another year or so, I'm sure. Thanks. Thank you very much, members of council. My name's Darcy Dunal, and I'm the architect and representing Nita and Jonathan Hunter Majors. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to this. As council will recall, we're requesting that Nita and Jonathan be permitted to leave their existing storage shed where it is currently located. For the overall amendment, which involved a new boathouse mainly, we were asked to relocate this shed to an area above the floodplain And we didn't realize that at that point it would be making it quite a bit more visible from the lake, as well as possibly disturbing some existing trees. So we feel that by allowing the shed to remain where it is, that there's several advantages to that. For one, it will have less impact on the natural vegetation of the island because you wouldn't have to rip it out and take out the existing piers, which would cause a disturbance in that area. And then in building the new shed to excavate and clear in that area for the piers. And although leaving the shed where it is now, which is in the floodplain, it is an area of dense tree coverage and is not that visible. It is tucked behind sleeping cabin number 2, and it's already quite unobtrusive because it's combined with the cabin, so it actually reads as one small structure. Which we feel would be better than adding another structure to the island that has several, as you know, several structures on it. So even though it's located in the floodplain, I'd suggest that because it's only a small storage shed, well below the 15-foot permitted height, that it be considered an acceptable shoreline structure in the floodplain, like the existing gazebo and the boathouse are. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. And just to confirm, Ms. Walker, staff are in support of leaving the shed where it is, and also to allow the screened-in porch.
Through your worship, we're comfortable with the location of the shed, even though located in the floodplain. It's a fairly small accessory structure that will not have any habitable floor space in it. In terms of the screens remaining in the sleeping cabin, was that the next question you had? Sorry.
That's correct.
I believe staff's preference would still be that the screens be removed. However, we'll take our direction from council on that.
Okay. At this point, before I read, we've provided first and second reading. I think we're just on third reading in this particular. And I'll go to council. They've been able to work with staff to leave the shed where it is, but there was a request to be able to leave the screened-in porch, which is currently screened-in porch. Any council members who are happy to leave the porch where it is? Councillor Ishikawa, did you want to speak? Or I've got thumbs up from a few people to leave the screened-in porch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councilor Mazan, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. If you could just walk me back through, or if staff could again, on this particular part. I just remember there was some conversation about the screens being left in or taken out and the precedence on this one. So logically, it makes sense to leave these screens in to me, but I do believe there was some dialogue. So if staff could help me out with this, thank you.
Ms. Walker.
So there's an existing sleeping cabin on the property that is legal non-complying. That's sleeping cabin number 1 on the site plan. It is oversized as of right and could be replaced or reconstructed as a legal non-complying building. But there was also at a later date a screened porch or veranda added to the existing legal non-complying sleeping cabin. That added habitable floor area because of the definitions in our zoning bylaw, where a screened room counts towards habitable floor space, increasing the size of the sleeping cabin. The original sleeping cabin, obviously, we have no concerns with, but it's the addition where the increase in floor area doesn't comply with previous decisions and our official plan policies, where the concern lies. So at this point, those screens have been removed, but my understanding, if the direction council gives today, is they can be put back in. And we just have to amend our minor amendments accordingly.
Okay. Anybody else? Question, comment? Ms. Anna, supplemental?
Yeah, I think my recollection of this one, once again, it's beautifully done property, and you know, and it's again, seems very logical, but my memory was that there was real concern that this was precedent setting. And I just have to go with what my feeling is, that if this is a precedent, then I can't support having the screens put in, even though in my heart, it feels like a fairly easy thing to do. So I just wanted that to be on the record, that staff's previous guidance on this one, I'm going to follow staff's direction, but it does seem like it's a difficult one. So I'm going to follow staff's direction on this particular application.
So I'm going to ask the question again. They came to us, they've asked for the screens to remain in, not changing any outside structure in any way. Councillor Evers, did you want to comment before I ask the straw poll about screens?
Yes. The reason I can support it, I think there was even a song about it, is in the middle of the island. And that so that it's not going to be visible. It's well treated and everything else like that. I can't see it being a precedent setting. It's a one of, so I can support it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask council this time, how many people can support leaving the screens on the porch as they are? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to leave the screens on. So Ms. Walker, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to remove the second amendment, which is an updated exemption to permit sleeping cabin to have a reduced floor area of 731. Does that number just need to change, or am I just removing that whole exemption?
Through you, we can remove the whole exemption, I believe. I'll have Mr. Sharp confirm, but the bylaw was originally written to permit the sleeping cabin as it's built today, which is 1,064 square feet.
Mr. Sharp, before I strike this out, are we okay just to remove that as you're reading your screen?
Thank you, Mayor Harding. I believe the minor amendment that we've put in front of you is to permit a floor area of, or reduce the floor area to 731 feet. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah,
that's correct. So we can remove that.
Well, I think that needs to stay in, right? Because the application as it was originally submitted was to permit a larger floor area. In other words, to permit the screens to remain in place, but it's council's will to have them removed, which would reduce the floor area to 731 square feet.
Okay, so it's actually council's will to leave it back into
where it is. Okay.
So we're going to remove that amendment. Thank you.
My apologies. I've really confused things here. Sorry.
Not a problem. It's been a long day. Councillor Nishikawa.
Well, it's all Bryce's fault. Sorry. I was also a little bit confused. Mostly because I was going off of the chart that was on the architectural drawings, and I was using those percentages or lot coverage. So I'm a little bit confused as to make sure that the numbers are correct. And if we're leaving in the screen porch, my understanding is we would leave also for the screens that would then be floor area. So I was looking at 10.9%. Am I looking at a different percentage now?
Ms. Walker, I don't believe we're changing the lot coverage area, correct?
That's correct. The porch area open would be permitted to remain. It is just the screens that are kind of in question at the moment. So the lot area wouldn't be affected, or lot coverage wouldn't be affected in this case.
Mayor Harding, I'm sorry, that's not clear to me how. I'm sorry, I guess I have to look at a drawing on it, but if we put the screens back in, that would be, generally that's floor coverage.
Ms. Walker, maybe you want to comment. There's a roof above the porch already, which is the lot coverage of 10.9% of the reading.
Thank you.
There's no new roof line. Councillor Jaglowitz.
So thank you, Chair. So now I am confused. If we allow the screens to go back in, does that mean then next year they can fill them in solid? Are we allowing that floor area, or what are we actually approving here? I'm confused. I assumed we were not recognizing the floor space, but we're allowing the screens to stay in, but not something else. Am I wrong?
So if I'm not mistaken, I'll go to Ms. Walker, but as soon as we allow the screens, then we technically have to call that floor area.
That's correct, Mayor Harding.
So then I wonder when people voted, did they understand they were allowing them to then fill it in solid? They don't have to just leave screens there. They'd be permitted to, is that correct? They'd be permitted to close it in and use it as a interior space. Is that correct?
Ms. Walker.
Through you, Mayor Harding, I don't believe there's anything that would prevent them from filling in those screened areas once we permit the floor area that exists today, which is 1,064 square feet.
So possibly we should not approve the floor area, but approve the ability to have screens in a open area or something. Anyway, that's my comment.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to read the resolution moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Bridgman under the wire.
Yeah, I know, just under the wire. I am going to change my vote then. I didn't realize also that could be put in. So I don't know if you want to do a straw vote again, Mayor Harding.
Okay, if I may then, before I go down this road, just to back up, any property we have that has a screened in porch, that screened in porch is considered habitable area. On the middle of this property, there is currently a screened in porch that is included in this. Staff had recommended that because it's an oversized sleeping cabin, that they should try to reduce the screened in porch. What I've heard from councillors around the table, and myself included, they've already got the screens on there. We're not adding any built form. It's in the middle of the island. We're stuck at the 10.9% lot coverage, and that's why I would argue that it could be a screened in porch and remain a screened in porch going forward. So I think, does that explain, Councillor Bridgman, the comment, if you still want to change? So happy to again ask the question of those people who are okay to leave the screens in the middle of the island and this property as it exists. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not sure, 6. I'm getting 6 people. So going forward, Councillor Jaglowitz.
Well, Mr. Chair, once again, you're voting on leaving the screens in, but the motion actually says they're allowed the floor space, which will allow them to close it in. So be clear, if you're calling the question that they're allowed to have an additional enclosed space, screens or not screens, like, please call it fairly.
Councillor Everts, maybe you want to comment from a committee of adjustment perspective, I think may help.
Yes, thank you. The screens are already there, and that it's a covered porch whether you have the screens or not. So it's the same lot area at 10.9. What they're trying to do is get away from the bugs and have screens in it. And I can still support it. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Nishikawa.
I think mostly also to clarify mostly I was concerned about that we included in the lot coverage that floor area. I don't have a concern about what they do after we approve this bylaw, whether it's screens or if it's whatever that looks like, because really then I'm sort of deciding what kind of draperies they might hang. Like it's that I'm mostly concerned about the floor area. That's what I believe is what we should be paying attention to. Thank you.
So I have the resolution moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Hayes. Be it resolved that Township Council amend bylaw 2022-52 Hunter and Major. These amendments are minor in nature and do not require further public circulation. Hereby approved prior to third reading. The amendment shall consist of the removal of exemptions related to sun deck additions off the north side of the dwelling veranda, an updated exemption to permit an as-built shed to be 43 feet from the high water mark, and related revisions to Schedule 2 of bylaw 2022-52. Any further comments? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. Clerk, that carries. Thank you. And finally, moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Jaglowitz, be it resolved that bylaw 2022-52 Hunter and Major be read a third time and finally passed. All those in favor? That too carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to Brown and Greenfield. Mr. Dunal, thank you for joining us today. Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Your Worship. In September, Planning Committee heard zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 21/22, bylaw 2022-82 in the name of Brown and Greenfield. The subject property has no municipally assigned civic address. Bylaw 2022-82 will have the effect of rezoning a portion of the subject land from open space private OS2 to waterfront residential backlot WR2. In September, Planning Committee recommended approval of the application subject to the approval of Bylaw 2022-149 to lift the 1-foot reserve along Clearwater Shores Boulevard. Bylaw 2022-149 was approved at the September Council meeting. No minor amendments are required and no new submissions have been received since the Planning Committee meeting in September. I have no further comments, but I'd be happy to assist Council with any questions. Thank you.
Okay, first and second reading moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Bridgman. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-82 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14, Brown and Greenfield, Rule 42102, be read a first and second time. First and second, all those in favor? That one's carried. No minor amendments. Third reading moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-82 Brown and Greenfield be read a third time and finally passed. Council, any final comments? All those in favor? And that is carried. Councillor Jaglowitz, I'm going to get you to mute your microphone. I think you left it open by mistake. Thank you. Let's move on to Borough and Hamilton. There we go, Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. In September, Planning Committee recommended approval of zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 2322 in the name of Borough and Hamilton. The subject property is located at 1523 Fish Hatchery Road, number 12, with frontage on Skeleton Lake. This application involves a property that contains 2 one-story dwellings, 3 sleeping cabins, and other accessory structures. The property is within the waterfront designation, where residentially zoned properties are permitted to have a maximum of 2 habitable buildings on a lot, those being 1 dwelling and 1 sleeping cabin. On lots that contain additional legal non-complying habitable buildings, such as in this case, an increase in the floor area of a dwelling or sleeping cabin is not permitted. In this case, the application proposes to add additions to both dwellings, and an exemption is therefore requested to permit habitable floor area increases. An exemption is also requested to permit a screened porch addition at a front yard setback of 23.2 feet from the high water mark, whereas the minimum required front yard setback is 50 feet. Planning Committee recommended approval, provided the proposed development is made subject to site plan control to require extensive renaturalization of the shoreline buffer and property, and also the removal of a volleyball court. And therefore, there was a bylaw on today's agenda to make the property subject to the site plan control process, and there are no minor amendments recommended. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions on first and second? Moved by Councillor Jaglowitz, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-84 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14, Borough and Hamilton, Roll 1219 be read a first and second time. Council, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. No minor amendments. Sorry, thank you. Third reading is moved by Councillor Bridgman, seconded by Councillor Jaglowitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-84, Borough and Hamilton be read a third time and finally passed. Final comments or questions from council? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that too is carried. Bornstein. Final application of the day. Ms. Crowder.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. In September, Planning Committee heard zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 3522ML, bylaw 2022-141 in the name of Bornstein. The subject property is known municipally as 1356 Peninsula Road, Unit 1 and 1357 Peninsula Road. The purpose of zoning bylaw 2022-141 is to rezone the property from waterfront residential WR2 to waterfront residential WR4 and to recognize 2 lots as 1 lot for planning purposes. In September, Planning Committee recommended the approval of the application to Council, subject to a minor amendment to restrict any habitable buildings and buildings containing plumbing systems on the waterfront lot, and that the development be made subject to site plan control for vegetation retention and plantings on the waterfront lot, to implement the recommendations of the species at risk and fish habitat assessment prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, and to require a site plan agreement wherein both the waterfront and backlot parcels shall not be permitted to be transferred separately. No new submissions were received after the September Planning Committee meeting. I have no further comments, but would be happy to assist Council with any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Council, first and second reading moved by Councillor Evers, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-141 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 Bornstein, Roll 4957-2 be read a first and second time. First and second, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We do have a minor amendment, and that's to restrict the habitable buildings containing plumbing systems on the waterfront lot. And that is moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be resolved Township Council amend bylaw 2022-141 Bornstein. And this amendment is minor in nature. It's not required for the public circulation. Is hereby is approved prior to third reading. The amendment shall consist of restricting any habitable buildings and buildings containing plumbing systems on the waterfront lot. Any further comments? All those in favor of the minor amendment? That too is carried. Third and final, moved by Councillor Jaglowitz, seconded by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-141 Bornstein be read a third time and finally passed. Third and final reading, questions, comments? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. So we're just making 6 matters. We're just making a quick thing. We have a number of 6 items that we need to deal with. There was also, just if I may quickly, I remember seeing, oh, it's gone somewhere. I don't know where it went. It's about our next meeting schedule, but we'll deal with that later because there's some planning meetings that don't happen for a while. October, do we have a planning committee meeting on October? We're in October. Oh, that's tomorrow. That's why we have a planning meeting tomorrow. I was thinking that was next month. And council, there we go. Okay, moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Hayes. Be it resolved that council in closed session convene at 3:31 p.m. for advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose and for litigation, potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And that is 6 matters, as well as 3 matters of litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, we're going to turn off the camera. Not turn off the cameras. We're going to turn off the YouTube and everything. And council, I'm going to suggest we just take a quick 7-minute break. Let's come back at 3:40. We'll make it 9 minutes. Come back at 3:40. Thanks.